The Jacksonville Jaguars didn't choose dysfunction. NASA's space shuttle program didn't choose catastrophe. The warnings came so often, though, they stopped feeling like warnings at all.
And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, JFK had bars. Man, he called his shot. Put a man on the moon before 1970. And damn, did the U.S. back it up. July 1969, Neil Armstrong walks on the moon. And December 1972, 4 years later, 12 men have walked on the moon. 4 years where we went from, is this the greatest accomplishment of mankind, to it's so routine, the television networks won't even cover it. Shoot, we haven't been back since. Only this year did we go around the damn thing with the Artemis II. Now, let me tell you about another 4 years. 1996, 97, 98, 99. The Jacksonville Jaguars, who didn't even exist in 1994, become a juggernaut. 4 playoff appearances, 2 AFC championship appearances. From nothing to something extraordinary. And what happens next for NASA? What happens next for the Jaguars? Failure, misery, degradation, institutional rot. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of the unofficial Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. This is a story about the dark days of Jaguars football and a story of the dark days of NASA, one of the most celebrated, and complete and awe-inspiring government agencies to ever exist. These two narratives are not equivalent, but they sure as hell rhyme. WB, put on that music. From the Campione Law Studios, located in the heart of Duval County, Florida. This is the unofficial Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Your host, Seth Studer. We back. We back, and we back, and we back, and we... Yeah, let it ride. Whew. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special episode. NASA and the Jaguars. What the hell do they have in common? Ladies and gentlemen, my 13th episode, and I'm going to show you Exhibit A. My first time doing this. These glasses that I wear each and every time. These are American Optical Pilot glasses. I got the gold on them because of the Jaguars colors, but the thing is these were the sunglasses that accompanied Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and all those dudes who walked on the moon. It's the same design. It's kind of crazy, like how such a monumental undertaking thought about everything, right? Even the sunglasses were part of the system. Everything planned out by the American government, right? And let me tell you about the machine that took them there. The Saturn V rocket. 500,000 pounds of thrust. And behind it, 400,000 people, engineers, contractors, scientists, astronauts. And now what did purpose look like for the Jaguars at the beginning of their franchise? January 97, a second-year expansion team walks into Mile High Stadium, like 15.5 underdogs against John Elway, Terrell Davis, Ed McCaffrey, Mike Shanahan, and pull up one of the just most amazing upsets of all time, upsetting the number 1 seed and making their way to the AFC Championship game. But if that was just a test launch, 1999 was the landing. 14-2, number 1 scoring defense. You had Jimmy Smith, Mark Brunell, Fred Taylor, a stacked line. And shoot, in the divisional round, 62-7 over the Dolphins. I think it's the most lopsided playoff history of all time. In one game, Dan Marino, we retired 2 Hall of Famers, Dan Marino and Jimmy Johnson. And the only thing that stopped us winning the whole damn thing was the Tennessee Titans, who was the only team we lost to, twice in the regular season and once in the playoff, with some alleged help from Titans defensive coordinator Greg Williams allegedly stealing the Jaguars playbook. That's not nostalgia. That was 1999 was a benchmark. It's a measuring stick. Every disaster and shitty season that you're going to hear about tonight, every disappointing free agent, every draft bust, every foam strike, every O-ring is measured against that achievement, the moon landing, and going 14-2 in 1999. Ladies and gentlemen, we used to know how to do this. The Jaguars used to know how to win consistently. And then listen to these numbers. 2000 to 2016, 17 seasons, 2 playoff appearances, 1 playoff win. 1 in 17 years. 2008 to 2016, 9 seasons. The Jaguars won 42 games in 9 seasons, 4.6 wins a year for damn near a decade. And during this era, tarps, blackouts, we became a punchline. The Jaguars are going to Los Angeles. The Jaguars are going to London. 17 effing years. That's not a slump. That is an era of garbage, a metric ton of rubbish that I and you had to suffer through. And tonight we're addressing that era head on. And we're going to compare the era from 2003 to 2016, the beginning of the Del Rio era to the end of the Gus Bradley era. And we're going to compare that to the National Aeronautic Space Administration, NASA, after the Apollo program. But why? Why would I do that? Because I really think it's important to look back and be able to understand that our dark days have been replicated in some form or fashion in history. Nothing's ever new. Another reason why I'm doing this is because what do decades in sports hell, do to a fan, do to a fan base, do to a city? And I think NASA is the appropriate vehicle to tell that story in. Because in episode 1, the last extended historical metaphor I did, I told you I need therapy. I need Prowler Prozac. Because after being hardwired on teal excellence from the Clinton administration, I've been the same franchise throughout most of the entire 21st century has been kicking me in the nuts, right in the balls, over and over and over again, training me. Just every single thing. It gets hard after a while. All the losing. And do you know what's the worst part more than the losing? It's the adjusting. And it happens cruelly, slowly. First, you lower your hopes. Then you lower your expectations. And then you lower your eyes. And one day, you catch yourself, like I caught myself, at the end of a 8-8 season, 500 football, and calling that a step in the right direction. A step towards what? I got used to it. You got used to it. We all got used to it. And this tolerance, ladies and gentlemen, this normalization of deviance is the exact same disease that infected NASA with the Space Shuttle program. And it killed 7 astronauts. NASA investigated itself, reorganized, said it learned. 17 years later, killed another 7 more. So what the hell happened? When did orbit around the Earth become good enough for both the Jaguars and mankind? One giant leap backwards. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Seth Studer. That's probably my name displayed down there. Socials maybe over here, maybe over there. I wanted to first shout out Campione Law. Special thanks to them for helping me put on this madhouse. Bad things happen to good people all the time. If you get in an auto accident, if you're hurt, you didn't ask for it, give us a call here at Campione Law. We'd be happy to help you out. Also want to give a special shout out to on the platform formerly known as Twitter, at Random Jaguars History, for helping me with some of the sports facts here on this program. He's been a big help, and it's been a pleasure working with him as well. But what the fuck happened? Right? What the hell happened after 1999? Right? And to begin it, we're going to be talking about the Del Rio era, but in order to understand that, you got to look at the end of the Coughlin regime, right? Because 1999, Coughlin built the roster that way. It wasn't for efficiency, right? It was to win that year. It was built to accomplish one thing. And when I mean building, I mean the salary cap. The owner at the time, Wayne Weaver, I think he called that the drive to win the Super Bowl that year was an intoxicant. But there's a trade-off, right? A price to be paid. We entered salary cap hell, and everything was up to 1999. And every time you restructure, right, you mortgage the future and you spend it on the present. Duh. But the Jaguars did it to such a crazy degree. Because Coughlin, that maniac, he controlled both the coaching and really the personnel. We didn't have a GM. General managers are kind of supposed to protect the future from the head coach. Tom Coughlin was the general manager. And the 99 Jaguars, they weren't like fraudulent, you know, they got unlucky. They were fucking great. But that greatness had to be financed, right? So, following the 2000 season, the ills of restructuring had become an epidemic that was killing what the team had built. In the winter of 2001, the Jaguars found themselves having to restructure contracts of players just to keep the players that they were restructuring. Keeping the core together was destroying the core of the team's future. Yikes. So, 2000. Fred Taylor runs for 1,400 yards in 13 games. Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardell, both go over 1,200 receiving yards. Excellent offense. The Jaguars finish with a top 10 scoring offense. They get unlucky, lose close games, 7-9. 2001, Tony Boselli plays 3 games. Fred Taylor plays, I think, 2. The expensive core begins kind of breaking down, getting older, because they had spent so much at the top of the roster. There was almost nothing beneath it. 2001, we go 6-10. With 6 games lost in the final 6 minutes. And that's the thing with these close losses. You can still, if you're the Jaguars, you can still delude yourself, convince yourself that you're like one healthy player away from another, postseason chance, another Super Bowl run. We get to 2002. The Jaguars, I think, enter the offseason with they're like $23 million over the cap. Over. That's before signing any new players. That's before improving the team. $23 million over the cap they were legally permitted to keep. And so they had to, become so desperate that essentially there was an expansion draft. Houston Texans came to the lead. They gave him Tony Boselli, gave him Seth Payne, Gary Walker, important defensive line depth, and most importantly, they had to let Keenan McCardell go. The thunder to Jimmy Smith's lightning was gone because the credit card bill came due. And in spite of all of that, Fred Taylor comes back and still runs for 1,300 yards. Jimmy Smith goes over 1,000 again. Mark Brunell is still slinging it. 2002, 6-10. The remaining stars could still produce, but they kept losing, and the bill came due. But ladies and gentlemen, 2000, 2001, 2002, NASA had 3 of those too. Apollo 18, Apollo 19, Apollo 20. Have you heard of those? I reckon not. Because Apollo 17 was the last moon landing. There were supposed to be 3 more. What happened? Like a bad TV show, they got shit canned. The greatest achievement, in my opinion, in human history got shelved. They had astronauts available. Landing sites were identified. But the political commitment was not there. It's like if the president at the time, Richard Nixon, brought the moon into the Oval Office and sat down with him like he was like Brad Pitt from Moneyball. Look, moon, we're going to have to let you go. It was a great run, historic accomplishment. Big leap for mankind. Proud of everybody involved, but it's time, Moon. So pack your things and make sure you see Susan on your way out. I'm not a crook. Apollo 18 was a cap casualty. 19 a post June 1, designation. Apollo 20, and it never made it to camp. And that Saturn V rocket I told you about, just a huge cap number, right? Thank you, Moon. Just don't sign with the Soviets. But Nixon canceled those, but he didn't cancel NASA, right? He canceled the destination, he canceled the program. And on its face, Nixon making that decision wasn't a bad reason, because NASA at its peak was taking up 4.4% of the entire U.S. annual budget, but that peaked in 1966. We're in 1972. By the time Nixon cut Moon, NASA was like 1.6 of the budget. Like 1/3 of what they were spending. Because NASA still had the employees, right? The astronauts, the contractors, the gravitas of what they just accomplished. Build off of it. You still have plenty of taxpayer cash. There's a difference in this analogy, and it's an obvious one, and it's a critical one. NASA completed their mission. They made it to the moon. The Jaguars never got to complete theirs, winning a Super Bowl. Right? NASA fulfilled Kennedy's promise that we heard at the beginning. Meanwhile, the Jacksonville Jaguars entered a retreat carrying the memory of shoulda, woulda, coulda. Now let's go to December 30th, 2002. Tom Coughlin is fired. Tom built the most successful expansion NFL franchise in history, in my opinion. But now he is fired. He built the machine. He exhausted the machine. And then he was fired, standing in what remained of it. So now, at this juncture, two institutions face the same question. What is NASA without Apollo? And what the hell are the Jacksonville Jaguars without Tom Coughlin? We'll be right back.
And I've spoken about the Jacksonville market thing. Yes, reality says it's a small market. Yeah. But the people here, the friendships that I've made, the business opportunities that I've come across, just the city itself, the growth that I've seen over the years. If I had gone to New York, a bigger market, or Philly, or LA somewhere, who knows if a kid from a small hometown like Belgrade would have been able to handle that. Yep. The media, how they beat you up, how I had to experience those things throughout the media with the injuries early in my career. Who knows if I would have been able to handle that. That's why God looked out for me, going 9th here in the state of Florida. And I'm thankful that, it allowed me to be here in Jacksonville, because if I had gone somewhere else, who knows if my name is in the Ring of Honor.
Yep. And let's keep it right here. 1969, before Neil Armstrong even steps on the moon, America is already confronting an absurd question. How do you follow the moon? Right? What is your encore when the opening act is Apollo 11? I mean, you just put a human being on top of a 36-story bomb, fire him 240, 1,000 miles through space, land him on another celestial body, and bring him home alive. What do you do next? In 1969, the answer was not, well, maybe we'll have a shuttle that can circle the Earth for the next 30 years. The answer is this. Bring it up. Look at this shit. This is an actual NASA planning document. And I want to take a moment to appreciate the title, Mission Evolution Through Hardware Commonality. That is the most NASA science sentence I've ever seen. Fucking bureaucratic, synergistic gobbledygook. But look at the ambition, though. Every piece serving a mission. A station orbiting the moon, a base on the lunar surface, reusable spacecraft moving people and supplies between them, nuclear-powered vehicles traveling beyond Earth's orbit, and you see on the right of that, Mars. NASA didn't view the Apollo program as the conclusion of the space age. It was the beginning. The moon was just the first road game. So in February 1969, 1 month into his presidency, Nixon charters something called the Space Task Group to answer that question. Go ahead and take it down. His own vice president is the chairman. 2 months after the moon landing, while the country, is still floating from the achievements that we just accomplished, the group walks in to Nixon and presents him kind of like, Mr. President, here are your three options. Option one, double NASA's budget, a 50-person station orbiting the Earth, a lunar base, and a human being on Mars sometime in the 1980s. Option two, hold the budget, then we'll grow it. We'll build the space station and the shuttle, and we'll be at Mars, here at the end of the 80s, maybe 1990. Option three, hey, forget Mars, but let's build a lunar base, just no Mars, everything else. They recommended option two. Try to get someone on Mars by 1990. Nixon made a decision, and he chose none of them. Not even the compromise for option three that his vice president even threw out there. Now, pull back up the zoomed in one. There you go. You see that little red spacecraft I've highlighted grotesquely in highlighter? That is the space shuttle. What will be one of the most recognizable spacecrafts ever built. And in this image, this is just an accessory, right? It's as consequential to the entire thing as like a pinky ring. It was a delivery truck for the future. Move astronauts and cargo into low orbit, where the stations and the nuclear-powered shuttles and the space and the jets and stuff, would take over the longer journey. The shuttle was just like the transportation. It's like a connecting flight to Charlotte or Atlanta or DFW airport, right? It was supposed to take us somewhere. So Nixon, you can pull that back down. Nixon takes the report and he does nothing for now. And finally, after 3 years, January 1972, Nixon announces the future of American human spaceflight. Not option one, not option two, not option three. It's just a space shuttle. No Mars, no lunar base, as you well know. We got the delivery vehicle, literally the shuttle. Think about what that word is. The ambition, right? And said, that'll do, pig. That'll do. Nixon decided just to bump NASA, bump ambition. It's wild. And let me be fair here. The space shuttle is fucking incredible, right? It launches vertically like a rocket. It lands like an airplane. It flew 135 missions in over 30 years. You know, that's not failure on its face. But the initial tragedy of NASA and the shuttle is that this extraordinary machine really had everything on it because it was the only thing chosen to go forward. So how did we follow the moon? We took away all the destinations, Mars, even everything. And worse, the space shuttle was like almost unfairly required to substitute as a future. And that's where we left the Jacksonville Jaguars. 2003. All right. Coughlin's gone. The cap is still being repaired. And Jacksonville makes its own announcement. A new era. A new coach. Who is it? Jack Del Rio. 39 years old at the time. Defensive coordinator. And the visual contrast between Del Rio and Coughlin was like immediate. Del Rio looked like he stepped out of an NFL uniform, right? Put on a headset, and that's where the weight room was. Like look at this picture. Look at him walking the sidelines in a Reebok suit. I think this is 2005. This dude we thought he was a future. And finally, we actually got a GM, James. They call him Shaq Harris. I think he was he's effectively the first general manager. He's the player personnel guy. But Del Rio, to be fair to him, he didn't inherit an empty cupboard, right? Who's on the team? Brunell, Fred Taylor, Jimmy Smith, defensive tackle Marcus Stroud, defensive tackle John Henderson. You ever see the clip? John Henderson would get slapped before the game. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, baby. Put some blood in my mouth. Dude was nuts. He inherited Mike Peterson out of free agency that year. Great inside linebacker we got from the Colts. Donovan Darius. Brad Meester, the center. And soon they would draft Rasheem Mathis and guard Vince Manuel. But the real core of the team was aging, and aging fast. The offense was just Fred Taylor's legs and I think at that time a 34-year-old Jimmy Smith. So defense first, right? Let's talk about the 2003 NFL draft. We mentioned it in episode 1. We're going to mention a little bit here just because of how important it is. One of the wildest things ever. Minnesota is on the clock. They're picking 7th. At that time, they're on the phone with the Ravens. The Ravens are trying to trade up and get a quarterback. Byron Leftwich. However, and the Jaguars are right there, Johnny on the spot, and run in the card. No hesitation, no deliberation. Byron Leftwich. When the story goes, it's not that simple. Story goes that Del Rio would have preferred, instead of Byron Leftwich, a pass rusher because they had those two defensive tackles in Stroud and Henderson. And who was on the board? Who did Del Rio like but Terrell Suggs? If the Ravens would have accomplished that trade and got Leftwich, I'm sure as shit serious that we would have probably drafted Terrell Suggs. We would have drafted Terrell Suggs. I can say that with confidence. Because here's the thing. We have Mark Brunell on the roster, but we also have somebody else. A 4th round draft pick from the year before out of Eastern Carolina University by the name of David Garrard. Right? But why do the Jaguars draft Leftwich? I mean, why do you sprint up after the Vikings just, kneeled out the clock on draft day? Leftwich in college playing for Marshall, he breaks his fucking shin playing for Marshall, I think during the 4th quarter. He breaks his leg while on the field. He stays on the field. He can't run. He can limp. He's completing passes, trying to do a game-winning drive. And his teammates are like carrying him down, right? After he's throwing dots. He can't run. He can't, and he's still, just toughness personified. That kind of toughness, I think, was just too tempestuous for the owner, Wayne Weaver, and the effective GM, Shaq Harris. So, no Terrell Suggs. Welcome to the Byron Leftwich era. So, just like NASA and Nixon chose the space shuttle as the future, we chose Leftwich as our future. But the system surrounding it is important, right? Because quarterbacks don't operate alone. Duh. But that's especially true for a quarterback like Byron Leftwich. Byron Leftwich was not mobile. I'm going to paraphrase here, but I think he was asked one time by a reporter if he was the slowest quarterback in the NFL, to which he quite funnily retorted, No, I'm the slowest black quarterback in the NFL. Needless to say, Leftwich is not going to escape 3 pass rushers, off of in a cornerback blitz, right? And so he needed protection. The other thing about Leftwich is he had a long football throwing delivery. He didn't release a football. He went through like a formal permitting process to throw the ball. Application submitted, environmental impact study. But if you protected him, if you gave him the time, Leftwich can drive that ball anywhere on the damn field. Leftwich was not defective. He was a specialized quarterback, a certain type of quarterback, right? But the offense around him is getting a little older. The remains of the salary cap hell era. No Keenan McCardell, no Tony Baselli blocking for him. Jimmy Smith, 34. So, rookie season, 2003. Of course, he doesn't begin the season as a starter. Mark Brunell does. Jacksonville starts 0-3. Brunell slowing down, injures his elbow, and now we got the new thing, the new shuttle, right? Placed into service. Not a year on the bench. No patient developmental year, right? It's Leftwich's ball now. And 2 starts into Leftwich's career, right? Think about like game 5. Del Rio, he decides to give this new program an identity. Del Rio's message is simple. Look at this shit. Keep chopping wood. But he didn't leave it as a metaphor. He placed an actual oak stump in the Jaguars locker room. And in the stump a double-bladed axe as a personal injury attorney by trade. This makes me giggle. Worse yet, like, players were like encouraged to take swings at the stump in the locker room. Safety Donovan Darius like tried it once. The story goes like he swings, the axe bounces off the wood and like misses his leg by like an inch. And Darius then decided he would, quote, never touch the fucking thing again, end quote. Short time later, our Pro Bowl punter, Chris Hansen, sees this metaphor / lawsuit in the making, swings, the axe comes off the stump and buries itself into the punter's right leg. Emergency surgery, season over. The Jaguars' motivational philosophy had literally injured a Pro Bowl player on their roster. Del Rio, I think, announced shortly thereafter, quote, I'll find another slogan, end quote. Bad juju, man. Bad juju. And so we tried to manufacture this identity, right? So aggressively that it took out our punter. But the sincerity was real by Del Rio. The toughness was real, but it had obvious flaws. And Leftwich's rookie season looked like a normal rookie quarterback season. 14 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. The Jaguars go 5-11, but there were some wins and moments to keep the fan base optimistic. I think November 9th, 2003, Peyton Manning and the 7-1 Colts coming to Jacksonville. The Jaguars have won maybe one game by then. Jaguars upset them 28-23. And for an afternoon, you can see as a fan this new era working. But here's the thing. The most dangerous thing for a rebuilding organization is not total failure. Total failure forces you to, just Control Alt Delete, do the plan over. The more dangerous thing is there just being just enough success to convince you that the missing piece is going to arrive next. Right? Just a taste of success. But 2004, we try to build around Leftwich. We draft with the 9th overall pick. Reggie Nelson famously wore 11 because it looks so good or something like that. 6'4", big body, physical. Hey, how about we have a giant quarterback with a giant arm throwing to a giant receiver? What could possibly go wrong? Being large is not the same thing as being open. Reggie Williams catches, I think, like 27 passes as a rookie. No touchdowns. But in 2004, we go on a win streak. First 3 games, we win, at the last minute. There was a 7-6 fist fight in Denver. Ernest Wilford catches a game winner against Buffalo. 3-0, all by 3 points or fewer. And then suddenly, you kind of look around and realize, hey, Jimmy Smith at 35 is their only dependable receiver. But then something weird happens. In Houston, Leftwich injures his knee. After the bye, David Garrard starts against Detroit and wins in overtime. Leftwich returns, and the Jaguars lose 3 straight. If you know anything about what happens next, you'll see that is you'll know what that means. They go 9-7 in 2004. Their first winning record since 1999. But no playoffs. And we're talking about diminished expectations, going from the moon to orbit, right? That's how they start to become normal. Because, it's enough to celebrate. The space shuttle reaches orbit. The Jaguars win 9 games. It's worth celebrating. But it doesn't answer the larger question. You know, achievement towards what? What are we building towards? 5 years earlier, Jacksonville measured itself against a real Super Bowl opportunity. Now, 9-7 felt like everything was working fine. And that wasn't irrational, because 2005 would validate that optimism. Not the other way around. Because in 2005, people forget the Jaguars went 12-4. The best Jaguar season since 1999. The Jaguars were back. Or were they? The flight data was telling it what it wanted to hear, right? But, and that metaphorical flight data wasn't false. The Jaguars did improve, and the shuttle did fly. The danger from both is the conclusion that just because a system works doesn't mean that the system is sustainable. Look here, April 12th, 1981, Space Shuttle Columbia rises from the Kennedy Space Center for the first flight of the shuttle program. It flew. The vehicle worked, right? However, on that very first flight, the space shuttle lost 16 heat shield tiles, and more than 100 others came home damaged. The flaw in the space shuttle was not discovered in year 3, year 10, year 20. It was present on flight number 1. You know, about the shuttle. In 2011, as the space shuttle program was ending, spoiler, NASA went back and calculated what the early risk of these space shuttle flights actually were. Not what they believed at the time, what they actually were, right? On any one of these early flights, they calculated the odds of losing a space shuttle and everyone on board was about 1 in 9. Not across all 9. 1 in 9 each time it flew. Which means by the time you get through, 25 flights or so, which is when a specific disaster happened, there was only a 6% chance of getting to that point. It's a flying tomb. And as the missions accumulated, the engineers kept seeing things that they weren't supposed to see. And they're like, well, it keeps flying. It's fine, right? Foam wasn't supposed to strike the orbiter. The O-rings aren't supposed to erode. And yet the shuttle, it's coming back. It's good. Launch, damage, inspect, repair, launch again. Each successful landing appeared to answer the question, can the vehicle survive this? And to them at the time, they kept saying, yeah, sure. The warnings didn't disappear. They're there from the start. Jacksonville in 2005 would have a great season. But they draft another weapon for Leftwich. This time, they draft another wide receiver, but he's never played wide receiver. They drafted a quarterback to be a wide receiver by the name of Matt Jones, who had a skiing problem, but I guess Jimmy Smith did too. Matt Jones played quarterback at Arkansas. He was like 6'6", ran a 4.3 40. Like this dude was like a spec sheet, right? But he wasn't polished, right? And that's what they needed. And, Matt Jones was not the only thing that Jacksonville acquired in the 2005 season. In February of 2005, Jacksonville, Florida hosted the Super Bowl. Patriots versus the Eagles. 78,000 people. Largest Super Bowl crowd, I think, in over a decade. And for 1 week, Jacksonville was the center of the football universe. And 7 months later, before the home opener in 2005, the Jaguars covered nearly 10,000 of their own seats with tarps. Because from 2001 to 2004, y'all don't remember that, half of the home games had been blacked out on local television. A whole different era. It was like the team, Sean Payton called us just a small market team, last year. We were. And the losing made that bigger. And Wayne, the owner, Wayne Weaver, what do you got to do? You shrink the building, put tarps over the seats. And that just became just a metaphor for, what's the cost of losing, right? Especially in a place like Jacksonville. But the thing is, it worked. Every game in 2005 sold out. No blackouts. Cameras saw full stadium. And, Jaguars had an aging but good team. Fred Taylor, Jimmy Smith, Stroud, Henderson. Good defense. And immediately, they start winning. Beating Seattle. 26-14. That Seattle would eventually go on to the Super Bowl. That was the Matt Hasselbeck year, I think. A month later, they go to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh won the Super Bowl against the Seahawks that year. Beat Pittsburgh. Overtime. Legitimate defense. And Byron Leftwich is playing the best football of his career. Through 11 games, he had 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That giant windup was working, right? The vehicle is flying. And by late November, Jaguars are 7-3. And they're headed to the first playoffs since 1999, right? They're on their way. But then, against Arizona, Leftwich drops back, the pocket collapses, and he breaks his left ankle. This quarterback whose entire identity was on the physical toughness, on the broken leg, can't go on. And who steps in? The guy who's been on the roster since before Leftwich was drafted, David Garrard. Garrard takes over, and the Jaguars keep winning. 4 victories in Garrard's 5 starts. Right? What more evidence can you have for the woulda, shoulda, couldas, right? 12-4. Best record since 99. First playoff appearance in 6 years. The tarps were away. The punchlines were away for a season. Jacksonville felt like a winning town again. We're back, baby. We're so back. And, the Colts go 14-2, and they enter the wild card round. And then a very important decision has to be made. The Jaguars are about to play in the wild card the 2-time defending Super Bowl champion New England Patriots. Leftwich was medically cleared, but he hadn't played in 6 weeks. The team was humming under Garrard. But, do you go with the hot hand, ride the hot hand like Bill Belichick did with Brady over Bledsoe, right? Or do you go back to the guy who started the year? Del Rio made his choice and started Leftwich. Before the injury, Leftwich was playing the best football of his career. But Patriots at the half, New England leads 7-3. Defense is fighting, right? The Patriots do their playoff Patriots thing. Tom Brady starts dissecting the defense. Willie McGinnis, overwhelms the protection. Leftwich, I think, throws it to a sideline. Who was it? It was like Asante Samuel. I think it was a pick six. Final score, Patriots 28, Jaguars 3, 12 wins, 3 points in the playoffs. And the conclusion that they thought at the time was obvious. We're close. Leftwich was hurt. He was rusty. He ran into Brady. Get healthy, add another piece. We'll be back. We'll be back. How many times have we heard that before? But, it wasn't a fraudulent team. But the Jaguars' leading receiver was Jimmy Smith, the last great component of the original program. Dude, he had 70 catches and 1,000 yards at age 36. But during that offseason, Jimmy Smith retires abruptly. 9 1,000-yard seasons. I don't think he caught a professional pass till he was like 27. Dude, he should be in the Hall of Fame. He would have been in the Hall of Fame if not for like the Jags tax. He is inarguably the greatest receiver this franchise has ever had. You have Matt Jones and Reggie Williams left. 2 first-round projects that neither reached like 650 yards. And Leftwich starts the 2006 season. And he starts the first 6 games, I think. And by late October, his season is over again. David Garrard takes control of the machine again. And the 2006 Jaguars become one of the weirdest teams in franchise history. Beating the Jets 41-0. In December, Indianapolis comes to Jacksonville. Big bad Colts. Jaguars run for 375 yards. Holy shit, a franchise record. Shoot, Fred Taylor, Maurice Jones-Drew just slicing them like butter. Jaguars whomp them. 44-17. Jaguars are 8-5, right? It's working. It's working. Just win one more. They lose their last 3. In one of those losses, the Jaguars outgained their opponent 396 yards to 98 and still lost. 12-4 becomes 8-8. 8-3 becomes 8-5 becomes 8-8. Jaguars miss out in the playoffs. And once again, do they even know who their quarterback is? After rushing in on 2003 with that draft card? And there's a difference between a successful season and a durable program. A successful season occurs, when every component is functioning. A durable program survives once one thing is removed. With Jimmy Smith still producing, take him out, what's left? Remove him? Who's catching balls, man? The quarterback question. Wild swings. And remember, the tiles were falling off of the space shuttle on flight 1. But it landed. Everything was working. Or was it? We'll be right back. What was that like for you to be kind of going into your 30s going, man, I still got so much game to play and so much left to prove?
Right. It was a challenge. Much like when they tried to label me fragile, the average career is about 3 years. I churned out 13. In my opinion, I don't see anything fragile about that. But,
no.
When they tried to plant that tag on me, I was like, all right, I got to do some things differently. And I just started to kind of shift a few things that I was doing, and I was able to play a lot more games consistently. And that post 30, from that mark onward, there was a stat that said guys after 30 started to decline.
Right.
For me, that was a challenge.
Yep.
So I was like, I got to turn it up a notch. So I started training differently and taking care of my body differently. I was getting a lot more rest at home. You know, my wife, she said, all right, no more 5 nights a week on South Beach. We got to dial it back to one night. So that way I was able to, really just focus and recover. And I have to also give credit to Maurice. Mm-hmm. Maurice was one of those guys who, from 30, I believe when we met each other when I was 30, we were teammates for 3 years. In my last 2 years, 34 and 35, I went on to New England. So from 30 on, I had a good, castmate.
Right.
A great co-mate that we shared the backfield, and we trained together in the off season. We challenged each other. We competed against each other, and we're still best of friends.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yep. It does.
So after a terrible 8-8 disappointment in 2006, Jaguars had a decision to make, right? They're trying to see, what vehicle worked. The answer arrived right before the season in 2007. Finally, a good season to talk about. Jack Del Rio names David Garrard as the starting quarterback and announces that they will release or trade Byron Leftwich like the very next day. The Leftwich era is gone. 4 years after they sprinted his name to the podium to tell the guy who's already been there that he now has the reins. Right? Remember Apollo 20 when I was doing my bad Nixon impersonation? Right? The one that didn't go off. Well, Apollo 20 wasn't just cancel. They kept the rocket, that Saturn V rocket, because they needed it for a space station. It was a space station built out of the spare parts of the Apollo program. Wild. May 14th, 1973, 5 months after the astronauts leave the moon, the last Saturn V rocket flies from Kennedy Space Center. It's carrying a space station with the pieces it already had. Because now it's going from preventing lunar bases to now we're putting up a space station built out of old parts, like we MacGyvered something together. But it wasn't easy. There were some problems. Can we build something with what remains of the last generation, right? And almost immediately after takeoff, it goes wrong. 63 seconds after launch, the Skylab shield tears away. A solar array is ripped off. It's short on power. NASA has to delay the mission. They're improvising, trying to, get replacements. But they don't abandon it. They repair it. And Skylab eventually works. It ended up manning 3 crews, 173 days aboard, right? They did 300 experiments, the most detailed study of the sun ever conducted above the atmosphere. Skylab didn't fulfill, and it wasn't like the next great thing. But it did show and was a reminder of what once was. It was a smaller mission, a damaged station, but one that worked. Meanwhile, what does Jacksonville have? Garrard from 2002, before Del Rio, Coughlin's final season. He survives the coaching change, survives Leftwich, spends 4 years, subbing in, holding it together, getting clutch wins at clutch moments. And then finally, in 2007, Jacksonville goes, hey, you got the helm, right? You got the wheel. And he's not the only piece inherited from the old program. You got Fred Taylor, who is aging like wine. You still got Brad Meester, defensive end Rob Meyer, and then those two defensive tackles, Marcus Stroud and John Henderson. Quarterback, a leading rusher, the center, in the middle of a defense. And then not obsolete machinery, but old. And around it, right, Del Rio added his own components. Rasheed Mathis, Maurice Jones-Drew, Marcedes Lewis, Reggie Nelson, the eraser, Darrell Smith, great outside linebacker. New parts integrated around the machinery of the original program left behind. So, the Jaguars stopped demanding in 2007 for every player to do something he was not, right? It's like, hey, what can you actually do? Fred Taylor was 31 years old in 2007. His 10th NFL season. Still hadn't been selected to a Pro Bowl. A shame. And somehow, he produces the most efficient season of his career. 1,202 yards, 5.4 yards per pop. 5 straight 100-yard rushing games down the stretch of the regular season. And his first Pro Bowl shows how stupid Pro Bowl selections are. Beside him, Maurice Jones-Drew, pocket Hercules, 5'7", 200 and something pounds, just thick, built like a bowling ball. That year, rushed for 700 yards, 800 yards. Jacksonville finally kind of understands its identity. We're not chopping wood in the locker room anymore. It doesn't ask either talented back to disappear so the other can be the star. It uses both. Shit, even Reggie Williams caught, like 10 touchdown catches that year. Right? You play to your advantage. And David Garrard, for the first 209 passes of the season, not one interception. On the year, 18 touchdowns, 3 interception, I think 102 passer rating, franchise record, and the third best in the entire NFL that year. He went 9-3 as a starter. Shit, Quinn Gray came in for 4 games. Quinn Gray, number 5, I think, went 2-2 in relief. The entire offense leaned into their identity, understanding who they were, scored 50 touchdowns, a franchise record, eclipsing the 99 season, the vaunted 99 season, which I put on the same pedestal as the moon. Because for the first time, and for one season, the design made sense. In December that year, Jacksonville goes to Pittsburgh. Cold, wind, I think snow, right? Fred Taylor rushes for 150. Jags win 29-22. 3 weeks later, they go back to Heinz Field for a playoff game. The Jaguars went 11-6 that year. So let's take us to January 5th, 2008. Jaguars' first playoff game with Garrard as the starter. Compare that to the 2005 game against the Patriots. Jaguars attack right off the jump. Maurice Jones-Drew, he was a kickoff specialist then. Returns one, 96 yards. Fred Taylor punches it in. Rasheed Mathis intercepts Ben Roethlisberger, right? Early in the fourth quarter, Jaguars are up like 28-10. And then Skylab station, everything wasn't hunky-dory. Pittsburgh comes back. 19 unanswered points. Jaguars find themselves with the ball late in the fourth quarter, down 28-29. And this is where every Jaguars fan kind of recognizes that feeling. Here we go. Of course, this is how it ends. And the drive stalls out around midfield. And then one of the most iconic plays in Jaguars history. It's 4th and 2 from the Pittsburgh 43. I don't know. It's a quarterback draw on 4th and 2. Garrard takes a snap. The left side opens with the assist of maybe a hold. And he runs. Not for the 2 yards to get a first down, but for 32 yards, rumbling, bumbling, stumbling, on his way into the red zone. Woo-wee, what a moment. I just remember how loud I was cheering when I saw that run, because you knew what was going to happen next. Scobie kicks the game winner. Pittsburgh's out of timeouts. Jags win. Good. 31-29, Jacksonville. We had won a playoff game, our first one in 8 years. And we did it in Pittsburgh. We won in Pittsburgh twice. No visiting team had ever done that before. We would do it again 10 years later, but that's another story. And what do the Jaguars get? Right? What's your reward for this great win against Ben Roethlisberger at Heinz Field? Your reward is Tom Brady and the undefeated 2007 Patriots. 16-0. Jacksonville goes to Foxborough. And unlike in 2005, they don't embarrass themselves. You know, at halftime, it's a tie ball game. It's 14-14. Garrard really, 278, 2 touchdowns against an undefeated team if we would have beaten the 07 Pats. But for part of that night, it slips away. They pull away 21-20. It's not a beating. It's a good game. But fair play, right? We're short of a Super Bowl, but we think there's something to build on. And that achievement was real. Just like Skylab, right? Built out of old parts was real. This team, repurposed out of old parts, produced something magical. It's not Apollo. It's Skylab. The program, for a moment, felt whole again. But that was for one brief season, you know? So the conclusion after 2007 was obvious. Hey, we're close. We're searching. We need one more component, one more push. Instead, almost everything that made that magical season work was about to come apart. And instead of focusing on those, I would rather focus on 2 players, both drafted in the same year, both drafted from the same school, UCLA. Tight end Marcedes Lewis and running back Maurice Jones-Drew. In 1977, NASA launches into space Voyager 2, and about 2 weeks later launches Voyager 1, both with 2 separate missions. Voyager 1 is currently the furthest item from our solar system now. Past Pluto, it is way outside our solar system today. Voyager 1 is Marcedes Lewis. For y'all that don't know, I mean, here in the year of our Lord 2026, Marcedes Lewis, drafted in 2006, was on the practice squad for the Denver Broncos for the 2025 season. Voyager 1 is still transmitting signals, music, language, in the hopes that extra, life outside of our planet could maybe hear them. And it's amazing what Marcedes Lewis has done with that longevity, and that deserves to be celebrated. Don't know if he's going to play here in 2026, but for 20 seasons as a blocking tight end, he was one of the best. He was a savant at it, right? A savant. And went to many years in Green Bay, Chicago. You want to celebrate the players for what they gave. Meanwhile, Voyager 2 gave us some of the most important information and did a hell of a lot for science, for the entire mankind, from places like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. I think it's the only spacecraft to visit Uranus and Neptune. And that's what Maurice Jones-Drew did for us during these dark years, right? Maurice got the rushing record in 2011. More on that later. Obviously, he was the lone star of abysmal teams after the 2007 season. But he provided Duval County with so much, right? It's a team sport. But sometimes certain individuals need to be praised for carrying the team, giving a shit, running hard. I mean, I'll never forget this block on Sean Merriman, right? Him running through tackles like a madman, bouncing off of defenders left, right, and center. So, back to the team. 2008, the Jaguars aren't supposed to be a declining team. They're actually a trendy Super Bowl pick, right? We got everyone back. We just beat Pittsburgh on the road. We lost to the, vaunted 2007 Patriots. But some tragedies on the team. Richard Collier is shot 14 times before the season, leaves him paralyzed. Jaguars start 0-2. Garrard, does his best. But Garrard still fights. Lee, beats Indianapolis on a late drive. Scobie kicks, a field goal in overtime against Houston, I think. They claw back to 4-3. Maybe this can be saved. And then they lose to then winless Cincinnati. Lose 6 of their last 7. The rushing attack that was second in the NFL falls all the way to 18th. Single players can't do it alone. Fred Taylor's ends with a thumb injury. They go 5-11. From a trendy dark horse Super Bowl pick to disappointment, to last place in the division in one season. Yet, Maurice Jones-Drew produces 1,400 yards from scrimmage, 14 touchdowns. After 2008, the last great piece of the Jaguars moves on, and Fred Taylor, obvious Hall of Famer at this point. And now it's MJD's team, right? No shared assignment. Everyone knows where the ball's going because the Jaguars don't really have any talent left. 2009, Jones-Drew, 312 carries, 1,400 rushing yards, 53 catches. 1,700 yards from scrimmage. Whew. Maurice Jones-Drew was the identity of this team in 2009. As for the football, we're 7-5. We're gritting it out. We're not dominant. We're messy. It's not pretty, but we're in playoff position. 7-5. Jaguars, I feel like I'm saying this again for the third time. They lose all 4 of their remaining games. 7-9. For 12 games, they were a playoff team, but for four games, they just disappeared. And, you know, we were talking about blackouts and the tarps, right? I remember this when I was a student at Florida in the 2009 season, listening to games on the radio because they were blacked out locally. A team playing in Jacksonville, Florida, and a Jacksonville resident can't watch it on television. And remember, this is already a shrunken stadium. Already tarps on 10,000 seats. You know, there was a community movement to sell tickets. It works. The blackouts are lifted, but think about how far we've fallen. 1999 to 2009. And it gets worse. 2010. There's 2 particular games I want to highlight. Things worth remembering because in all this shit, there's something to take from it. The first one is Peyton Manning comes to town. October 3rd, 2010. Tie ball game. 3 seconds left. This is before the K-balls and Cam Little, all due respect. Josh Scobie kicks a 59-yarder to upset the Colts, the longest attempt of Scobie's career to that point. Jags win 31-28. And Jacksonville erupts. Right? That old sound. Sound of a city that lost his voice for a while. You know. Actually, a few weeks later, they play Houston. It's the final play of the game. It's a tie game. Jaguars are at midfield. Hail Mary time. David Garrard rolls slightly to his left, if I remember, launches it into the end zone. And Houston's Glover Quinn, right? Jumps up at the goal line, bats it down. Just like you're supposed to do. Just like you're taught to do. The correct play, right? But there's a reason why the Jaguars called that Hail Mary play rebound. Because Glover Quinn bats the ball into Mike Thomas's arms. And he sneaks it in across the goal line for a walk-off Hail Mary touchdown. Ooh! Man, I can hear Gus Johnson's call on that here now. Oh! Absurd, lucky, perfect for a moment. And that's one of the most sharpest moments in my memory. Because for once, after these late season slides, the ball finally bounced Jaguars' way, right? Jones-Drew is having a great season. Marcedes Lewis having a great season. The Jaguars are 8-5. We've been here before. They're first place in the AFC South. We've been here before. Well, they lose once, twice, thrice, 8-8. For the second consecutive season, they were in playoff position and just, what are we doing? 4 straight in 2009 down the stretch. Lose 3 straight in 2010. 7 consecutive, I guess, closing defeats in that spread. No playoffs. In Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 they were scientific experiments, right? But they prove that it's more than a team. They prove that this rot that we're talking about with NASA, this rot that we're talking about with the Jacksonville Jaguars, among the blackouts and all the crap, it doesn't erase the individual greatness that's produced. 8 men in a box, 9 men in a box, it didn't matter against MJD because you knew it was coming. It was a one-dimensional offense. 5'7". And we get to 2011. More on 2011 here soon. Because that's the year where everything falls apart. But for MJD, right? 343 attempts, 1,606 yards. He gets the NFL's rushing title on a 5-win team with nothing around him. Won it from a collapsing program. We should not diminish what some of the individuals on the Jaguars did for the Duval faithful. We'll be right back. We'll keep it right here. Let's talk about the most difficult part of this exercise, the Space Shuttle Challenger. January 28th, 1986, Cape Canaveral. It's the coldest morning in the history of American spaceflight. There's ice on the launch tower. And on the launch pad, the shuttle and 7 astronauts. Among them a school teacher, Krista McAuliffe, the first citizen headed to space. School children across the country are watching live. 73 seconds after liftoff, the Challenger explodes over the Atlantic Ocean. All 7 are lost. Here's what the country did not know about that morning. The night before the launch, engineers at Morton Theukel, the company that built the rocket boosters, got on a call with NASA and begged them not to launch. It's about the O-rings. These are rubber seals inside these rocket boosters. The ones that had been eroding for years. The engineers knew that these O-rings stiffened in cold weather. The coldest launch in shuttle history by that point was 53 degrees. Remember, we're in Florida. And even at 53, the seals of the O-rings has shown damage. I mean, and the forecast for that next morning was 36. For years, it was like, oh, it's fine. It keeps coming back. Why would we have to prove that it's safe to fly when people's lives are in jeopardy? There was a decision to be made, and the decision was made by NASA to go ahead. 4 months later, after this disaster President Reagan put together a commission, and one of its members was a physicist by the name of Richard Feynman. The commission asked a simple question. What do you think the odds were that this happened? This is just, 4 months later. The engineers, this Feynman guy spoke to the engineers. They put the chance of catastrophic failure at 1 in 100. Management at NASA's number was 1 in 100,000. What's risk? Who are you listening to? Same vehicle, same data, interpreted by the engineers differently than the bigwigs. After the explosion, a sociologist named Diane Vaughan spent years in the NASA documents. And in doing so, there was no villain. There was no liar. She found that an institution had seen warnings so many times that it stopped becoming a warning, right? You speed, you get away with it. So you speed again, and you speed again, and you speed again, and you speed again. Nothing happens, you speed again, and eventually you get pulled over, crash happens, etc. Eventually, these warnings just become noise. And she gave this disease a name. And it's one that I mentioned at the top of this episode. It's called the normalization of deviance. Obviously, nobody died in the Jacksonville Jaguars story, right? We're comparing the shape of this disease, this normalization of deviance, not the cost, but the disease. And it inflicted the Jaguars. Here's how. We haven't talked about drafts for a reason. We haven't talked about why there was no talent on some of these teams from 2008 to 2011. In April 2008, after making the playoffs, the Jaguars trade up all the way to pick number 8. Cost them like 2 extra picks. The pick is Derek Harvey, who I saw play live at Florida, defensive end. Because for 5 years, the Jaguars have been trying to find the same problem. They had D tackles in Stroud and Henderson, but they were getting old. But they didn't have any pass rush, no edge. And I go back again to the what if with Terrell Suggs and Byron Leftwich from 2003. Remember that? But Derek Harvey, 8 total sacks total. And that GM Shaq Harris had made that trade, and he got the boot at the end of I think he resigned at the end of the 2008 season. And here's where that normalization of deviance comes in. They hire from within. For the new GM, they pick Gene Smith. I would say he is the worst general manager in NFL history. He was a scouting director, right? He was kind of this guy who liked to try to outsmart the system. Picked from small schools. Get this statistic, right? Talk about normalization of deviance. Okay? Gene Smith had 4 drafts. 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. From 09 to 11, for 3 of those drafts, 70% of his picks came from non-BCS schools, from Division II schools. The arrogance. What are you doing? Just a natural deviation from the norm, from SEC, from Big Ten, from all these, power conferences. He thought he can outsmart them? I'll be fair to Gene Smith for about 3 sentences. He believed in his board. He believed character and evaluation would play out. He wasn't lazy. Okay, fairness over. What are you doing drafting all these people from non-BCS schools? What do you think the process is going to look like? In 2010, they have the 10th pick. Draft Tyson Alualu from a Power 5 school, but one who is a consensus second rounder. He ended up being an okay pro, but it was just so against the grain that even then you're going, huh? We need talent. We've lost all these older players. One man's evaluation over everybody's. It was like bizarro James Gladstone. The engineers knew about the risk. The management didn't. Gene Smith believed in his process. And let's talk about the price. Because what happens when you draft bust after bust after bust after bust, non-contributor, non-star after non-star after non-star after non-star? In Gene Smith's entire 4-year tenure, not one Jaguar received a second contract. One. Hollowed out a franchise that needed an influx of good talent. He kept breaking the rule and breaking the rule and breaking the rules. And are you surprised that when we're shit? And it all culminated in 2011 because Garrard was out. And we move up in the draft from 16 to 10 to draft Blaine Gabbert, quarterback, Missouri, 6'4", big arm, kind of looks like a poor man's Trevor Lawrence. And listen, Gabbert, a lot of people, evaluated Gabbert and didn't hate him as a prospect. But when you make a decision at the quarterback level, right, it has to be the right process, the right time, the right person. And one decision, one cold morning, one bad draft pick sets a space shuttle program years and sets the Jaguars years as well. And 2011 was a lockout year, right? No offseason program. And what became an underperforming team around the 500 hollowed out into a husk of its former self. In 2011, after drafting Blaine Gabbert, Gene Smith in the 3rd round, on a roster devoid of any talent, drafts a fucking punter, Brian Anger. Rich Eisen said punters are people too at that time. which they are. But they ain't worth the 70th pick in the draft. When Russell Wilson's selected, 9 picks later, or a few picks later, or whatever. God. And as a fan, Luke McCown starts that year, right? And Gabbert comes in a few games into the season, and you're watching, and you just realize he ain't got it. He's playing scared. He's just bracing for the contact. That's not there. Seeing ghosts a la early Sam Darnold. Right? His rookie year, abysmal. 50% completion, 12 touchdowns, 11 interception, sacked like 40 times. And it's because it's not just the quarterback. Blaine Gabbert maybe could have worked on a complete team, but Gene Smith kept going against the grain over and over and over again. This normalization of deviance, where, of course, he was going to fail. There was nothing fucking around him. So, in that same 2011 season is when I already talked about Maurice Jones-Drew got the rushing title. Was the only person doing with a pulse. And finally, at the end of 2011, Del Rio was fired. 9 seasons. Longest tenured coach in franchise history. People forget that. And then Wayne Weaver, that same afternoon, I think, announces that he sold the team. But it's the arrogance. It's the arrogance of saying, hey, I don't care if it's 35 degrees, if it's negative 20 degrees, we're launching. It's the arrogance of saying, I don't care about any of these top prospects. I see a diamond in the rough. I'm going to pick him with every pick. 4 Gene Smith draft classes, 4 years of consensus bypassing, small school, little dick energy, conviction. And 1 gets a second contract. Y'all thought Trent Baalke was bad. After Challenger, NASA grounded their fleet for 3 years. They had a commission, a redesign, a reorganization. They say that they learned, right? After 2012, Gene Smith was out. There was going to be a new coach, a new start. Jacksonville 2 said it learned. But if you know anything about what happens next for the space shuttle and what happens next for the Jaguars, new starts don't mean new and different results. So I neglected 1 draft pick during my Challenger rant. And that's our first round draft pick in 2012. Justin Blackmon, receiver, Oklahoma State. The 2-time Biletnikoff Award winner for the best wide receiver in college football. In 2012, we end up going, 2-14. But Blackmon, my God, had so much talent. And you can see it on the field. In April 1990, the space shuttle carries up the Hubble Space Telescope. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's probably the greatest scientific experiment ever built. It's decades of work, billions of dollars. It's an eye to see to the end of the universe, right? But the first images from the Hubble Telescope come back, and they're blurry. What the fuck? Well, the reason is there was the mirror is wrong by a length of 2.2 microns, 1/50th the width of a human hair. A small flaw caused a huge disadvantage. A flaw that you couldn't see, right? Look at it. A flaw you couldn't feel, but a flaw that was obvious based on what came back. Blurry vision. Justin Blackmon had blurry vision too. You know, and people who describe him said he was bright, warm, magnetic, right? But Tampa, we pick Blackmon at pick number 5. Tampa has pick number 5 that year. And Tampa Bay had heard some things about Justin Blackmon. So they sent out a scout to Stillwater, Oklahoma, to sit in a bar for a week and count how many times Justin Blackmon walked in. Let's just say he walked in that bar too many times. And Tampa Bay trades out of that pick to Jacksonville, to Gene Smith, from 7 to 5. And you know, and so many warning signs. It's a great article called Fade Route. I think that was on Grantland back in the day. Blackmon's own high school coach, you know, a guy that loved him, sat with the Jaguars, with Gene Smith, a Jaguar scout before the draft, and told him everything about Justin Blackmon, how wonderful kid he is. But then he also told the scout this: I think Justin might have an issue with alcohol. And Gene Smith, I'm the character guy, right? I'm the evaluation guy. Traded up anyways. Even like your own, you know, what you say you are, you go against that. And I guess you took a risk. And he produced on the field. He was arrested for aggravated DUI prior to the 2012 season, before his first training camp. He played anyways. Rookie season, magnetic. 64 catches. In one game, 236 yards against Houston on a 2-win team. In 2013, he opens up the season with a 4-game suspension, and he comes back, and he is dominant. 29 catches in 4 games, 190 yards against Denver. A Denver defense that will represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, right? 4 games. And then he is suspended indefinitely. He's 23 years old, and he never plays it down at professional football. You know, and I want to be careful here. He's a human being with a disease. But the decision and the hope and the snatching of that hope away embodies this shitty era of Jaguars football. You know, what's funny enough is I think the Jaguars still today own the rights to Justin Blackmon, who's I think like 36 years old. They still do. It's like a ghost. It's been around this team. And I think after this last season that we had with Liam Cohen, hopefully the ghost of Gene Smith and all of those terrible tragedies and draft picks are finally gone. But at the end of 2012, the Jaguars finally did what every broken institution does, and they start over, right? Tear it down. New GM, new coach, new uniforms, new logo. When were the two-tone helmets around this time, right? Brand new, right? We bring in Dave Caldwell from Atlanta and hire the hot defensive coordinator from Seattle, Gus Bradley. Did an excellent job there with the Seahawks and the Legion of Boom. And Gus Bradley still coaching now. Like, impossible not to like. A lot of energy, a lot of joy, big smile, just believing in victory. Do your job, saying all the right things. And we have a new owner in Shad Khan, who's going, okay, I'm going to trust the process. Get rid of everybody. Let's see what happens. And we were talking at the beginning about these diminished expectations, right? And it seemed like Gus Bradley was giving the program some oxygen it very much needed after just miserable campaigns in 2011 and 2012. Caldwell, the new GM, tears down the roster, right? Because of, you can't do worse than Gene Smith. What are you going to do? There was nothing there for him. You have an aging MJD. You have Blaine Gabbert. Is he even still on the team in 2013? My God. And then the scoreboard tells a story, right? Home opener against the Chiefs, 28-2. Then Oakland, Seattle, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Denver, San Diego, San Francisco, and London. We're 0-8. It's a new franchise, though. Blaine, shoot. Brian Leftwich's first year went bad, and then it went better. Trying to justify it in our heads. By the halfway point of the 2013 season, Jacksonville had been outscored by nearly 180 points. The season's already a write-off. It's developmental. There's just nothing there. But after the bye, there's some growth. They win 4 out of their last 5, I think. And suddenly the worst first half in franchise history becomes evidence that the program is working. Just kind of like the one with Leftwich, but worse. Because there's nothing on the roster. There's not the talent and the amount of players to do their job. And so, 2014 draft. They understand that they have to get a quarterback. And they draft Blake Bortles out of UCF. 6'5", big arm. Blaine Gabbert with male pattern baldness like me, and more muscular, right? He's a tough guy though, right? He's a developmental prospect. The plan's to sit him. The plan in 2014 was to sit him. Not for a month, but for the entire rookie season. Let veteran Chad Henne come in. Let Bortles learn. Build the system. Do it the right way. That plan goes out the fucking window week 3. Indianapolis kicking our ass 30-0 halftime. Hey, just put the guy in there. Go for it, big guy. And you see the talent. He's mobile. Looks like a white Vic sometimes. Escapes, throws on the run, makes really impossible plays into huge gains. But then the very next decision is as confounding as the previous one was astounding. So the plays are spectacular, and so are the mistakes. But you see talent. And in 2014, we drafted in the second round, Allen Robinson from Penn State and Marquise Lee. Also brought in an undrafted rookie out of Miami by the name of Allen Hurns. In the first game of the season, 2014, Hurns catches 2 touchdown passes. It's finally like we're able to get talent before, right? So the mirage of hope is there. And Bortles is sacked like 53 times that year. Jaguars go 3-13. By no measure a good season. By every measure, an abject disaster. But it feels okay. How? How have we sunk so low? Moon to orbit, to suborbital. And then comes 2015. And for the first time in years, it's so weird. The Jaguars seem fun. They're losing, but they seem fun. There's a difference. But there's only a difference after season of disappointment and garbage. But when we were watching, that difference didn't feel important at the time. Bortles throws that year for like 4,400 yards, 35 touchdown passes, a then franchise record. Only Tom Brady has more touchdowns than that. But it was garbage time Bortles, right? It was a mirage. It was just some sort of dopamine that the Duval faithful could hit just to feel something. Allen Robinson, like 1,400 yards. Is he the next Jimmy Smith? Allen Hurns, another 1,000 yards. Is he the next Keenan McCardell? I remember distinctly we get flexed into a 4:30 game against the Saints and they just ball out, just running up and down the field. I don't even remember if they won that game. Jaguars hung 51 on Indianapolis. 6 touchdowns in the second half. Jacksonville's 5-8. And they lose the final 3 games. 6 points, 5-11. Allen Robinson was genuinely great that year. Bortles genuinely improved that year. They're not imaginary yards or touchdowns, right? But where are we going towards? What's the destination? The Jaguars that year in 2015 scored a respectable 376 points, about middle of the pack, 14th in the league. It allowed 448 points against, second to last. It's a mirage, and it hurts. We'll be right back. So this mirage, I believed in it, right? I'm guilty. I drank the Jaguars Kool-Aid in 2015. I also drank the Kool-Aid about the space shuttle, personally. Quick story. It's 16 years after the Challenger explosion. Enough time has passed that it's history. The date's November 30th, year 2000. The space shuttle Endeavour is about to take off, the 97th space shuttle launch. I'm in Cape Canaveral. Why am I there? Because in the pilot seat was a gentleman by the name of Mike Bloomfield. He went to college with my dad. They were friends at the Air Force Academy. Someone I knew, family friend. And this is not part of the metaphor. This is memory. And it's weird sitting there at Cape Canaveral in the dead of night, knowing somebody is sitting on top of 4 million pounds of machinery and propellant and to be blasted off into space. It's right there. The entire sky turns white. And the one thing I remember is that I felt nervous, but I didn't know why I felt nervous. It was just looking at it. It's like, oh my God, I know someone on there, but this is just another flight, right? This is normal. This is normal. The normalization of deviance. I trusted the process. I trusted the pilot because my dad said he was a nice guy. And I also feared because I understood and saw what this machine was. And it was a weird dichotomy. And Mike Bloomfield came home, mission accomplished. I think he made one other flight or 2 or 3 other flights or something like that. And it was a spectacular launch. But I just remember that trepidation and going, I dig this, but something's not right. Meanwhile, another personal anecdote. Let's jump ahead about 15 years later. It's May 2015, day 3 of the NFL draft. I'm a public defender at the time, and I get a call from Jacksonville. I get a call from a Jacksonville number. I pick up, and then they go, hey, this is Dan from the Jacksonville Jags. And I think it's like a robocall, so I just click. 30 seconds later, I get a call. Hey, this is Dan from the Jacksonville. I'm like, what? Double robocalled me? And he's like, no, don't hang up. And I'm like, why? You won. I won? You won a sweepstakes. What sweepstakes? The pick the draft sweepstakes. You're going to announce the draft pick. And then I'm like, no. And I was like, I did when I was bored one day. And I had never entered a sweepstakes before, but I did. I remember entering it. I'm like, I won? Yeah, you won. And sure enough, I show up to Everbank Field on day 3 and announce the 4th round pick and the 5th round pick with our first round pick from 2015, Dante Fowler, future Hall of Famer Tony Baselli, and lovable mascot Jackson DeFille. Go ahead, play the clip, WB.
To announce the next pick in this year's NFL draft is Seth Studer from Green Cove Springs, Florida.
Thank you, Tony. With the 104th pick of the 2015 NFL draft, my Jacksonville Jaguars are proud to select James Sample, defensive back, Louisville.
Woo! Who didn't see that one coming?
He didn't have his shoes on. He knew it was coming.
I love that. Who didn't see that one coming? Hey, He wasn't supposed to throw me in the pool. He wasn't. Then Jacksonville whispered in my ear. He's like, you know you're fucking going in, right? And I'm like, yeah, brother. Like, I'm going to sell this shit. And like, I'm living my dream, right? I got friends there. And I'm just so bought in to this process. And in that 2015 season validates my optimism with the stats I talked about before. Right? And the coach, Gus Bradley, is saying he has a culture. Shad Khan, probably one of his greatest virtues and his greatest detriments is his patience. You know, and James Sample was not a ridiculous pick, but he plays 4 NFL games. Actually, funny enough, when I looked at the card, I said James, and it said James Sample. I thought it was maybe a sample card, but I went ahead and read it anyways. But just for me as a fan, I got that rush and that same belief that I got sitting in Cape Canaveral. But I'm also not blind to the scoreboard. I'm also not blind to the standings. I see that Bortles is putting up garbage time stats. So, just another flight, right? Just another season. Yeah, it became this culture of losing that we in Duval County have not shaken off, even in the year of our Lord, 2026. It's why us fans have, I'm wearing this Duval versus all y'all shirt, this weird inferiority complex, right? We want to be respected. Well, what the fuck have we done to earn respect? We've just lost over and over and over and over again. And then every time we go to the playoffs, we don't make it back. And this is where the acceptance comes in, right? The 5 stages of grief. We got used to it. We got used to losing, and NASA got used to having the space shuttle and everything in low orbit be the pinnacle of manned space flight. We'll be back with our final segment here in just a second. We'll keep it right here. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get to the final act, I want to, again, shout out Campione Law, my employer, where I'm an attorney. We do great work over here in personal injury and pretty much in anything where bad thing happens to you and you didn't ask for it. Give us a call. We'd be happy to help you out. Also, again, special thanks to at Random Jaguars History on X, Twitter. Give him a like, a follow. Great account to follow. Appreciate him getting some of my X's and O's, Jimmy's and Joe's here together while I undertake this epic. So, we end with Columbia. NASA had a phrase for this danger. It's one I hear a lot in personal injury work, actually. Accepted risk, right? Not eliminated risk, not solved risk, accepted risk. What? Because everything has risk, right? October 2002, the Space Shuttle Atlantis launches, and in so doing, a piece of the insulating foam breaks away from the external tank and strikes one of the rocket boosters. NASA investigates. The cause is unresolved. But next flight waiting, next man up. You know, in foam and tiles, they've fallen before, right? The orbiters, they've come home before. This normalization of deviance, this tolerance throughout. It's something to handle later on. So, on January 16th, 2003, which I think is the exact same day to bring this full circle that Jack Del Rio is announced as the Jaguars' second head coach, Columbia launches. You know, and they begin a 16-day mission. 81 seconds after liftoff, another piece of foam breaks away. See right here. It strikes the leading edge of the wing of the spacecraft. The impact is there on camera. NASA sees it on day 2. The engineers are asking for better images, right? But foam had struck before. The shuttle had come home before. So this foam strike enters the family of things that this institution believes it already just understands. Accepted risk. The foam was just as dangerous. NASA just was more familiar with it. It was in the family. 6 weeks after the Columbia disaster, more on that soon, the Jaguars sign a free agent by the name of Hugh Douglas. 3-time Pro Bowler, 12 and a half sacks the year before in Philadelphia. We sign him to 5 years, $27 million. He's the new face of Jack Del Rio's pass rush. Another addition to that defense that we were talking about at the beginning of the program. He gave Jacksonville 3.5 sacks. 1 season, and he was gone. Hugh Douglas is the first free agent lesson of this new garbage era of Jaguars history we've been discussing today. You know, Jacksonville, you can buy a player's resume, but you can't buy the environment that produced that prior excellence, right? You can't buy the culture. And for the next 14 years, this organization kept trying to finish this roster through free agents. Because as we were talking about with Gene Smith, the draft failed to produce anything. So the Jaguars would bring in a temporary core in the form of expensive free agents. There's only 2 ways to really build a team: draft or free agency. And you'd rather nail the draft than free agency. But, you know, where there's a need, there's a need. You know, and I can give you every name of every free agent flop between seasons 2003 to 2016. I don't need every name, but I think 8 will do. Hugh Douglas, 03, 5 years, $27 million, 3.5 sacks. 9 years later, Hugh Douglas told Jaguars fans, "You wish you were in a position to steal like I did." He didn't deny it. He bragged about it like it's some fucking paid vacation, right? Yeah, I robbed your franchise. Jerry Porter, 08, 6 years, $30 million, 11 catches, 1 season. Jacksonville came off that playoff win against Pittsburgh and brought in the missing receiver. What I actually bought was just the end of an aging veteran's career. Same year, Drayton Florence, 2008, 6 years, $36 million, $12 million guaranteed. By October, he lost his starting job. By February 2009, he was gone. Aaron Campman, 2010, 4 years, $25 million, 11 games in 2 seasons. He arrived recovering from one ACL, then he tore the other. That's not theft, that's bad luck, right? Laurent Robinson, 2012, 5 years, $32.5 million after one breakout season in Dallas. You can see the Jaguars reaching and paying more and more money, a Jags tax for these free agents. Laurent Robinson, 24 catches, 4 concussions. It's a gentleman named Aaron Ross, smaller signing, 2012, 3 years, 1 season, no interceptions. He was at the Giants. I think he returned to the Giants and called Jacksonville, quote, a nice paid vacation to Florida, end quote. To be fair to Aaron, he later apologized. But that sentence survives in every Jaguars fan because we recognize that insult, right? Because we have debased ourselves so much. Next one, Zane Beatles, guard, 2014, 5 years, $30 million, veteran anchor to rebuild the offensive line, gone after 2. Then finally, Julius Thomas, 2015, 5 years, $46 million. Jacksonville and Julius Thomas saw the 24 touchdowns in 2 seasons by the Peyton Manning-led Broncos and thought that, hey, that output will just translate. There's more than that. There's more to building a team. There's more to building an institution, right? And Campman was not Douglas, right? Robinson was not Ross, right? Injuries aren't character flaws. Not every failed contract represents a player that didn't care. But the indictment on Jacksonville is that they found every way possible to spend big money for big free agents, for all of them, most of them, to fail. Whether it's age, injury, fit, role, desperation. Yeah, Hugh Douglas called it stealing. Aaron Ross called it a vacation. 2 completely separate eras. Same feel. So let's go to March 2016. Let's go to the 2016 season, right? Meanwhile, we're having a reason to believe, right? After that 2015 garbage time Bortles season, something, please, Gus Bradley, do something. The foam breaks away, the vehicle lands, the contract disappoints. Accepted risk. In 2016, we go 3-13. On December 10th, 2016, Julius Thomas placed on injured reserve. 8 days later, Gus Bradley is finally fired. There's an end to rebuilding, right? It can only get you so long. And honestly, Khan kept him around a lot longer than he should have. Back to the Columbia. It's February 1st, 2003. After 16 days in orbit, Columbia returns to land like a plane, I believe in Texas. That foam strike that had hit the left wing, superheated gas enters it. The structure fails. The vehicle comes apart on its descent over Texas. Another 7 astronauts are lost. NASA stands for need another 7 astronauts at this point. There was an investigation, of course, and they found the cause, a physical cause, the foam strike. But we knew that. the foam damaged the wing. But NASA's history and culture had already decided what those foam strikes meant. Tolerable risk. The institution created the risk, the tolerable risk. The Jaguars took on hundreds of millions of dollars in free agents. Tolerable risk. For what? And this is where the story comes together. And there is an important distinction between these two shuttle tragedies. The Challenger was a decision. Remember? Go or no go. It's 36 degrees outside. The O-rings. The Columbia was not. It's something worse. It's that tolerance. The Challenger can be concentrated into one night and one decision in a vacuum, even though, the safety, it was a miracle that there hadn't been a Challenger disaster before it. But it came down to one choice. The Columbia's harder. Nobody sat in a meeting and approved, 22 years of foam strikes. The organization approved one flight and then another and then another and then another and another. And each safe landing, again, this normalization of the wrong thing. Everything's good. And how far have we fallen? How far has Duval County fallen from the heyday of Tom Coughlin? And how far has NASA fallen? One giant leap for mankind. One giant explosion over the plains of Texas. I'm going to return to that 2011 analysis by NASA way later. It tracked the odds of losing a crew flight by flight over the 30 years, right? Across the first 25 until Challenger, nothing got safer. But a different tune was whistled as soon as astronauts were lost in the sky. The odds improved after the Challenger, and they improved after the Columbia. Safety was reactive, not proactive. The Jaguars were reactive, chasing after these big names, drafting these risky picks, drafting a punter in the third round for fuck knows reason. The draft and the Challenger, right, gives you a decision. Who do you pick? Circle it, turn it in. We'll fire the general manager if it doesn't pan out. And free agency gives you an accumulation. 5 year, one contract, one injury, one bad fit, one, again, just not accepting, thinking it's a paid vacation, one player collecting a check, right? So don't tell me it was one bad contract. Don't tell me it was one bad general manager. Don't tell me that it was one bad coach. 14 years, 3 front offices, hundreds of millions promised and paid, the same press conference, the same explanation, the same result, the same losses, actually getting worse and worse and worse and worse over these 14 years. What does that do to a city? What does that do to a fan? What does that do to a fan base? When you start accepting less, when you start tolerating. And then the Jaguars entered the 2017 season. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for sticking with me through this incredible ride. Special thank you to Campione Law. Special thank you to @Random Jaguars History. Remember, buy UM, uninsured motorist coverage. Jackasses be driving around all the time with really crappy insurance. You think the people that cause the most accidents have great coverage? Guess what? They don't. Buy UM, and because that's what's going to protect you when you're not at fault and you got injuries you didn't ask for. My name is Seth Studer. This is the unofficial Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. I'm so excited to be coming to you bi-weekly throughout the 2026 season. I'll see you soon for a season preview. Take care.